I once knew a priest who had a reputation for making enemies. He did it mostly by giving homilies on controversial topics many weeks in a row. He would call out things that were going on in the community, maybe in the parish, or in the society at large. And he would give examples and analogies that were sometimes so direct, so searing, that people would kind of cringe in the pew. Several times I was told secondhand that he was called into the bishop's office to explain, what's in this letter that I got from this person about you saying this or that, or what are we hearing about what's going on there? And he would say, Bishop, what do you expect? I'm a prophet. People hate prophets. They don't want to hear the truth. That's all it is. Now, on the one hand, we can definitely hear that. That's what it says in the first reading from Ezekiel. People are rebellious by nature. So if they get called out for something, they don't like it. They push back. People don't want to be called out. People don't want to be told they got to change what they're doing. That's kind of natural. But because we know to expect that, we know that we're going to need to be prepared to manage what we say to people. Ezekiel was told by God this exact quote: whether those people heed or resist, because let's face it, they are a rebellious people, they will at least know that a prophet was in their midst. So the question is, like for example with my priest friend, were they in the presence of a prophet? Or was he kind of a self-indulgent type who had a microphone and liked to say whatever he wanted? How do you know if you're a prophet or more of a foghorn? Well, I think in the readings we can see that there's three things that are traits of being a prophet. How do we know that the message we're sharing really needs to be shared? Well, the first one of those three is, no one gets to call themselves a prophet. That's God's call. No one gets to appoint themselves to that office. If we're supposed to be a prophet, we're going to receive that from God. And we know that in the first reading, Ezekiel was called in that way. Warned, just so you know, this is not going to be an easy assignment. But you're positioned right in the people who I need to talk to, and you've got the right amount of credibility. So Ezekiel, I'm sorry, but you're it. You're on. I need you to be the one to give this message. So the first thing that helps us to know is we didn't appoint ourselves. It was given to us. The second follows. It's that we're willing to pay a price for the message that we're asked to share. You can't be a prophet if you are afraid of rejection, or if you need people's approval more than you need the satisfaction of knowing that you're doing the right thing. Because prophets get rejected. Always. Not by everybody, but by a lot of people. If we were German citizens in the 1930s, and we could see clearly that Hitler was dangerous, if we dared tell our neighbors that, we were going to get turned in. We were going to pay a price. And the price was not small. We may get sent to a concentration camp. Many did. But if that is the truth that must be shared, then we pay that price. Later, after the truth is revealed, we wind up building monuments to these people. We have statues in parks to them, but not in the moment. First, they get ridiculed and oppressed. I read a news story last summer that scientists have developed a new super white paint. It's the whitest white that has ever existed. And it's meant for buildings, for the tar roofs of buildings in cities like New York, so that when the sun's rays on a weekend like this are beating down on the tar, the white paint can deflect the heat and the rays and send it back into space. And the first thought I had was, I wonder if they can develop that for humans. Can they dip us in something that can make us more resistant to rejection so that we don't care so much? So that it's not so hard when people disapprove of us? When I see that somebody in the back made a face when I said that during a homily and I go, ooh, she doesn't like me. Could they dip us in something like that? Maybe something to develop. So the second thing that lets us know that we are on the right path as a prophet is if we're willing to pay the price. We're not getting a lot of recognition and attention, usually quite the opposite. And the third one has to do with knowing what our Achilles heel is. You know we all have one, right? Everybody. Everybody has an Achilles heel. And it could be anything. Maybe you've got an anger issue. Or maybe you like nice things just a little bit too much. Or maybe if you get into a tight spot, you're quick to tell a fib. I don't know what it is. It's different for all of us. But we have to know what it is. And we have to factor it in our life all the time, but especially when we're thinking about being a prophet. This is what we heard in that second reading from Paul. Paul doesn't call it an Achilles heel. He calls it a thorn in his flesh. And we don't know what it is. Could it have actually been physical? Like an actual kind of fleshy problem, like a disability? Maybe. Could it have been an addiction? Or some kind of character flaw that everybody could see? Did he have something in his past that haunted him? You know, where people could have Googled it and it would have come up right away and he couldn't escape it? Whatever it was, he asked God to take it away from him. He said, God, I could serve you so much better if I didn't have this. Couldn't you just take it away? And God said, no. You would not serve me better. You serve me better in your weakness. If I took this away, you'd be strong and you'd be relying on yourself. Instead, I want you to be weak and rely on my grace. A prophet always has to be aware of their Achilles heel because they come from the people naturally. They're from the people. They're not above the people. That's what gives them credibility, is that they're one of the people. So the prophet has to know what their Achilles heel is so they don't cross over into the realm of hypocrisy. Nobody wants to hear from someone who is struggling with that themselves. When Eliot Spitzer was the governor of New York State, there were many things in New York that needed to be cleaned up. But prostitution in New York City was not one that he should have taken on. And history will record that forever. When we have an Achilles heel, we have to know it and we have to honor it, or we will pay the price. Interestingly, my entire priesthood has been during a time of scandal for the church. You know, it's been 20 years now that we've been enduring this, the shame of what happened in the church. And it's interesting that I've had several conversations with people over the years that have had kind of the same theme. They've said, you know, Father, especially right after the scandal broke, when it was still so fresh and raw, it was kind of difficult to go to church and hear a homily about something involving sexuality, or have a statement come out of the Vatican about how to live, you know, a noble life if it had to do with sexuality. It was like, shouldn't the church be a little quiet about this for a while? Wouldn't it be a sign of modesty to just take a couple years to just maybe be cautious about how to share that message? Now, many of you may be thinking, well, come on though. I mean, you can't not preach the truth just because of a bad period or bad apples or however you would say it. And I think we can honor that point of view, definitely. But this point of view is probably worth thinking about. That modesty and humility demand that when we're aware of what our Achilles heel is, we factor it in. we have the modesty to not be bold about that particular area, at least as we're going through our own journey of recovering. So, this week the question is, has God ever called you to speak up about something? How did you know that you were being called by God to do that? How did you know it wasn't just a pet peeve and you weren't just somebody wagging your finger and sounding shrill? And if you did speak up, what did it cost you? Did you pay a price that you can actually measure for that? Have you ever spoken up and then later realized, oh boy, I spent my 20s telling my parents how to live their life. Gee whiz. Have you ever realized it was actually not a message from God, but a message that was coming from you? We can hear in the gospel that if we're going to speak up with a message God gives us, we're going to get rejected, at least by some. We're not better than Jesus. He was rejected in his own hometown. But we know that that's part of the story, and we can't let it stop us. There will always be other people who are speaking up as if they're prophets, and it's not true. So we'll never be able to speak up unless we're also willing to ask ourselves some tough questions. Am I a prophet? Or maybe a foghorn?